Hello, I am Rita Fuller. I am the Family Engagement Education Consultant on the Special Education team at the Department of Public Instruction, as well as the organizer of the State Superintendent's Advisory Council on Special Education. Recently, my colleague, Nissan Barlev, Director of Special Education for CISA 7, and I were given the great pleasure of interviewing Dr. Karen Mapp. Dr. Mapp is a well respected and nationally known author and lecturer who has been blazing the trail in the field of educational innovation. So, I invite you to listen in on our interview and share in her knowledge and wisdom on the subject. So, today we are so thankful that we have the opportunity to interview the nationally known author and research practitioner in family engagement, Dr. Karen Mapp. So today we are going to cover two very important topics. We're going to talk about how do we implement links to student learning and building family engagement at the IEP meeting. And we're also going to talk about how can a state agency best collect data to document family engagement.
Dr. Mapp, we're very honored to have you here in Madison, Wisconsin at the DPI and WISP Summit on family engagement. Wisconsin was inspired by your work on family engagement and in fact created a section on an IEP that asked IEP team members to identify the kind of family engagement activities that are linked to student learning. And we know that is the essence of your work. How do we connect parents to students' learning? If you can give us a few examples how that will work.
Okay, so I think that, well, first of all, and this is something I mentioned to Rita, that I wanted to say today, and I haven't said that, I actually cut my teeth, my early teeth on family engagement in a full inclusion school setting. I did my research at what was known then as the O'Hearn Elementary School, and now is the William Henderson School, which was a full inclusion school. So much of what I learned, my early theories and frameworks around family engagement, came from the O'Hearn. And so just to give you an example, their whole mindset was around how a lot of what we do in family engagement is something that a colleague of mine calls random acts of family engagement. That a lot of times we do the traditional things, which include sometimes IEP meetings, and we were just hearing from families on a panel how sometimes in the IEP meetings, having the staff share with the families, okay, now that we've identified some of the goals for the child, this is what we're going to do and have a nice day. And they don't say, how can we together work on specific activities, supports that we can all engage in together to support the learning goals that we have identified. And so at the O'Hearn, this was a part of their everyday culture. Whether it was in an IEP meeting or in the classroom, families were always made aware of what should my child know and be able to do at this grade level, at this stage. Here are the things we're working towards. And then they would brainstorm. So you might think that the teachers would then say, okay, here are strategies that you can use at home. That wasn't the only part of the conversation. The teachers and the staff would say, what are some things that you've noticed that work with your child around these learning goals? So it wasn't just the experts saying, these are the particular engagement activities that you should do. The staff said, tell us what you've noticed, because then maybe we can learn something from you about the kinds of activities we should be doing with your child. So it was very much a community type of conversation, a collaborative type of conversation. So for example, and there's many examples of, and one of the things that I try not to do, because this is what happens. Sometimes if you give a specific example, people don't understand that the context matters. So an example that might be right for one child is not necessarily right for another child. But what I'm trying to explain is the process. So when you start identifying the academic or social emotional developmental goals and you share those with families and you talk openly about them, the next step is, and I'm glad this has been included, what are the specific activities that we can work on together? And again, I think the most important piece is having that conversation be co-created
Back and forth.
instead of just, oh, here's the list. I know you've seen this, I've seen it, here's the list,
Right.
this is what you should do. The other problem is a lot of times we don't then give families a chance to learn how to do it. We just give a list, but
Right.
we don't have an opportunity for people to actually practice it. I'll be talking about this when I talk about the dual capacity framework.
Sure.
So, and families want that because I can't tell you how many times, whether it's regular ed or special ed settings, families say to me, Miss, because you know families will call you, could you please tell them to let us know what is it that our child should know how to do? How does this compare to where they should be, right? And then, what are some things that we can do together to connect and to do better? Parents want to know that, and a lot of times, surprisingly enough, we don't share that information with our families.
Okay.
And that's what we mean by link to learning and development. Whatever family engagement strategies you put together at your school, at your program, should be aligned with whatever you're trying to do in terms of the kids and their learning.
Sure. Thank you.
Dr. Karen Mapp, how do we incorporate the element of fun in engaging parents in their students' education?
Well, again, what I learned at the O'Hearn is that it should always be fun. And so, you know, learning is fun.
Yes.
This is the thing, sometimes I scratch my head because we always talk about how learning should be fun and then we go and do boring, awful, you know, oh,
Yeah.
can I get out of this meeting kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I think if we, first of all, I think if we don't take ourselves so seriously and we always make sure that there's an element of fun and engagement in any kind of activity that we do, I think that that takes a lot of the edge off. So, you know, whether it's breaking bread together at the beginning of some kind of meeting or an icebreaker where we get to know each other. Again, this is where sometimes I tell schools when you form your committee around family engagements, because every school should have one that includes family members, and the family should represent sort of the different demographics and abilities at the school, so you get that voice. I often say, get the people who want to be cruise directors when they retire, right? Because they're the ones who always come up with all the, you know, things that you can do to make something lively.
Yeah.
But we know how to do this. You know, if I came to your house, Rita, you wouldn't open the door and start telling me the rules of the neighborhood, right? If
That's
we
true.
did a housewarming party and I came as a new neighbor, you wouldn't open the door and say, well, you know, these are the rules of the neighborhood. This is the time you put the trash out.
Right.
Don't park here. You'd start
Right.
out by introducing me to Nissan. You'd start by and making me feel comfortable. So we know how to do this, but for some reason, when we get into our environments, our schools, our programs, we leave the human part outside the door. I think me and my colleagues are saying, bring that in. Let that be an element because it is important. I will listen to you more when I see that you and I have a trusting relationship. I'm willing to share with you more when I see that, right? So fun should be a part of it. You know, there's going to be times when it's going to be difficult, but if we spend the time on the relationship piece and the fun piece, when we have those tough meetings, it'll be a lot easier to resolve.
Awesome.
The family engagement element that you bring up in your writing and books and research links parents in students' learning. What are some examples of family engagement that does not include learning, just to make sure that our staff is aware? What are those that are connected to learning versus those who are like baking sales that are not connected to learning?
Yeah, I actually feel very strongly that there should be an element of learning in every single type of family engagement initiative or program. And people say, well, doesn't that take the fun out of it? And then I say, well, wait a minute. I thought learning was fun, right? So it's almost as if educators, I said, what are you saying? Think about what you just said. You're saying that what you do isn't fun, which is a whole other story. But so, for example, and I have a video on this, I have gone to many open houses around the country, which I would say are done out of compliance, and they take the playbook that was written 70 years ago, where the families come in and they're talked at by the principal, and then they maybe they learn a few things, and most of the time people say the principal talks about the rules of the school, and then they go to the, most times, especially so at high school or even elementary and middle, they'll go to the classroom. What do they hear more of? Rules. Or what we expect of you in terms of volunteering and bake sales and donations. And for a lot of our families who are not of means, right then and there we've already said things to them that make them feel like they don't belong. And then the families leave. And I say we miss an opportunity at that first meeting, whether it's a back to school night or open house, first of all to build relationships, but also to maybe engage in some conversation about what are our goals this year around teaching and learning. Here are some of the areas that we really want to see our students excel. And I will tell you something I know that this is the case because I've had educators reveal it to me. Sometimes they say, well, we don't really want the parents to see what we're doing wrong. And if we show them that we haven't hit our academic targets, then they'll say, well, what's wrong with you? Or maybe I'm going to pull my child out of the school. And I say, well, if you set the culture that we're in this together, we all have personal goals, right? Whether it's to lose a little weight or to exercise, right? We all know that we're not quite where we might want to be. And so, but I have had people say to me, well, if we tell them, then we're telling them that we're not. I said, but you're not there for all of your kids. Why wouldn't you want a whole group of people to help you get there, right? So I have seen too many events where they're all about sort of that's the way we've always done it kinds of things, and not at all about sharing our learning and developmental goals. And I know for a fact that families really feel that's why they don't come back. They don't come back. I went to this thing, I didn't learn anything, I didn't get a chance to get engaged in learning what my child should know and be able to do. I have a little test sometimes when I go to districts where I'll go around town if I have time. And I'll go to the supermarket and I'll ask, I see you have a wonderful teenager. What should your child know and be able to do by the end of the school year? Most times, parents can't tell me. I went to Singapore a few years back. Every parent could tell me. Every person could tell me. Even people who didn't have children in the schools knew here are our country goals for education. I mean, we could get into all of the conversation about when a country decides that education is the top goal, right? Unfortunately, we don't have that here in the United States, which is, I think, a problem. But everybody knew. So this is what we mean by, not being linked to learning versus something that is linked to learning and development.
Thank you.
Dr. Karen Mapp.
Just Dr. Mapp.
Thank you. Dr. Mapp, what could you advise us on specific questions that a district should ask their parents to assess how they're doing with their family engagement practices in the district?
So now here we're going to have a little mini conversation about evaluation and about research. So I had a wonderful, wonderful teacher, two teachers actually, Judy Singer and John Willett, when I did my doctoral work at Harvard. And I didn't think I was going to be interested in statistical analyses and all that. Judy she's a phenomenal teacher. And one of the things that she used to talk to us about, you study what you are interested in terms of your outcomes. So it's very difficult for me to just say, here's the questions you should ask. Because the first question I want to know is, what are the outcomes that you desire? right?
That's right.
Because the outcomes then drive the questions that you're going to ask about whether or not you've hit your goals. Okay, so say for example you have a intervention which is around how much families know about the IEP process, or how comfortable do they feel with the IE process, right? So you've designed an intervention, and the goals are, you might have outputs and outcomes if you're using a logic model. You then are going to design your questions based on the outcomes you're looking for. Now, what I would recommend is to see if there have been surveys designed already, because survey design is hard. I learned that. I was very blessed to be a part of a wonderful project at Harvard with a colleague, Hunter Galbraith, and we designed survey questions, and actually some of them will fit some of the different we tried to do a series of maybe 8 particular ideas around family engagement. Designing survey questions is hard. It takes time. You have to validate them. They have to be made reliable. You go through all sorts of steps. So there's already some wonderful tools out there, but what you want to do is say, here are the outcomes we're interested in. Are there tools out there that have questions that match the outcomes that we'd like to study?
Yes.
Okay? And so I can actually, give you some tools that have been created for that. But again, you want to target your survey questions or the intervention that you're going to use around evaluation based on what your intended outcomes are. Because you could ask a bunch of questions and then find out at the end they didn't help you answer whether or not you hit your goals.
Okay.
And I see that a lot of times too.
Thank you. Well, we would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Mapp for her time and interviewing with us. I know it's going to be some great resources available for people all over the state of Wisconsin.